Hey everyone, in this lesson we're going to be continuing on with the online game that we're creating. Now, we already finished up the HTML and we already finished up the CSS, and this is how our game looks like so far. It looks good and all, but nothing happens. We can't make it do anything. Now that's where JavaScript is going to come into play. We're going to go ahead and add the JavaScript aspect of this game, which will give it life and will allow us to actually become a game. Now, JavaScript part of this code will be the hardest part because there's going to be a lot of things we don't know yet, and there's going to be some things that are going to be challenging for us. So I'm going to try to take this as slow as possible, and I'm going to make this as easy to understand as possible. So let's go ahead and understand what we have so far. So as you can see, we have our regular table data over here and table data over here that will be dynamically updated. So as you can see, this day will update anytime someone survives that day, and this message will update depending on whether the person dies or whether the person survives, and it will also update whenever we click on a pumpkin in order to hide. It will tell us good luck. Now, the main aspect is right here. Now, these are the table data that contain our images, and we have added the attribute to these images of hide me. Now this will run a function called hide me, which will allow the code to understand exactly which pumpkin the user is wanting to put or is wanting to select. Now as you can see, we've given them different attributes in order to signify what pumpkin they're choosing. So hide me 1 will choose the pumpkin number 1, hide me 2 will choose pumpkin number 2, and so on. So let's go ahead and add the JavaScript part of our code. So we're going to go to the closing tag of the table and we're going to add another line. Now what are we going to add? We're going to add our script tag. So we're going to do bracket script, and we're going to close off that bracket. Now anything inside here will be our JavaScript, and now we're going to give ourselves a lot of room because it's going to be quite a long script. Now let's go ahead and define a couple of variables we're going to be using throughout this entire program. That first variable is going to be called day counter. Now as the variable suggests, this will allow us to track what day the user is currently on. Now we're going to automatically set this to 1 because usually the games start at day 1, so we want to set the day counter as equaling 1. So day counter will be equal to 1, and then throughout the game we're going to be incrementing this by 1 if the user survives, or we're going to reset this back to 1 if the user dies. So let's go ahead and make another variable. So var hiding place. Now this will keep track of where the user decides to place their pumpkin, or decides which pumpkin to choose to hide in. Now we're going to associate hiding place with the pumpkin number that they choose over here, and we're going to allow us to access that number through our function. So we're going to set var hiding place as 0. It doesn't really matter what we set it as right now because later on when we're defining our function, we're going to give it a value that's different than 0. So the first function I want to create is going to be called a draw screen. Now I want this function to run automatically when the page loads. That way the page resets itself and the day counter resets itself, and that we can display something over here that tells us, hey, we're on day 1, and this is going to be the message, and we have the appropriate pumpkin pictures that are going to be displayed. So I'm going to make a function called function. So that's how we write a function. We write function and then we write the name of the function. So let's call this one draw screen. Now this one won't have any attributes or parameters inserted into it. It's going to be a straight up function that just does something. So now we're going to add the curly braces in order for us to start writing the code that we want this function to do. So we're going to add the first closing curly brace, and we're going to automatically get that closing one. So let's give ourselves some space to work with. Let's go ahead and just delete these couple lines over here because it'll automatically go to the next line for us. So what we want to do is we want to update the day counter. So as you can see, we have the day identifier here, and inside here we have nothing. So when the program first runs, I want this to actually say something like the day is currently 1 or day 1. So let's go ahead and do that. Now the way we do that is we're going to access the inner HTML inside this identifier, and we're going to update its inner HTML to say day 1 or day 2 depending on what day we are on. So how do we do that? Well, we take the identifier's name, which is day. So let's go ahead and write day, and now we want to access the inner HTML of that day. So how do we do that? We put day.inner HTML, and what do we set that as? Well, we're going to have it say day, so day is going to be in a string, and we want to give this a number that's going to be attributed to the day counter. So if the day counter is 1, it's going to present day 1. If the day counter says 2, it's going to say day 2. Now since the variable starts at 1, it's automatically, when the function drawScreen automatically runs, it's going to say day 1. So let's go ahead and add our variable. We don't have to use any double quotes for this. We'll just go ahead and write the variable name. So we're going to call this day counter, which is the variable we're going to be using to keep track of the day. Let's go ahead and do that. And next up, we want to just make sure that when we draw the screen, we get the appropriate SRC for the images on each of these. So we're going to go ahead and set an SRC and dynamically update it. So we're going to go ahead and say picture 1. So that's the identifier we gave for the first picture, right? And we're going to give this dynamically updated. So we're going to access the SRC of this. And how do we do this? We're going to go and say pic1.src will equal, and then in quotation marks, the GIF file that we want. So pumpkin.gif. And then we add a semicolon, and then we do the same thing for the rest of the pictures, pic 2, pic 3, and pic 4. So let's go ahead and do that. So pic2.src will equal pumpkin.gif. And let's go ahead and add a semicolon and work on the next one. So pic3.src will equal pumpkin.gif. Let's go ahead and add a semicolon. See if I misspelled something. And then lastly, pic4.src will equal pumpkin.gif as well. And let's go ahead and add a semicolon. Now what's left? Well, we know that there's a message over here that says where will you hide. Let's go ahead and make this draw screen also say where will you hide. So we're going to go and access the inner HTML for this identifier message. So how do we do that? The same we did it right here. We're going to say the identifier name, which would be message. So message.inner HTML will equal, and let's put in quotation marks, where will you hide. Alright, and there we go, and now let's add a semicolon, and now we have a function fully built. This function will draw the screen and reset everything for us, and will update the day counter automatically. Now let's go ahead and have this function automatically run when we load the web page. So how do we do that? Well, we just call the function, and the way we do that is by writing the function name. So this would be draw screen, and then we just put our 2 parentheses, and inside here we would have any arguments that we want to put in here. But since we're not filing any data or passing any data or variables through here, we don't need to put anything in there. So we're just going to end this off with a semicolon. So let's go ahead and see what this looks like so far. Let's open up our web page and let's refresh this. So as you can see, we now have our day counter over here, and we have the message saying where will you hide, but these pumpkins are still not doing anything. I also noticed that there's a spacing problem over here, so let's go ahead and fix that spacing problem. Let's go and say, let's go ahead and add a space right after day over here, and that should fix our problem. So let's go ahead and refresh this. And now we have a space between day and 1. That way it looks clearer. So now we have day 1, where will you hide, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we are ready to go and work on our next function. Now this function will not automatically run when we load the web page. It's going to wait for the user to click on a picture of a pumpkin. Now as you can see, we already gave this function a name, which is going to be called hide me, and we know we're going to have to pass a parameter through it, which is going to be the pumpkin number that the user chooses. So let's go ahead and make another function. So this is going to be called function, and this one will be called hide me. So hide me with no uppercase, so hide me. And then we're going to add our parentheses, which will have our parameters. Now the parameter we want to put is our pumpkin number, so we can say that this value is going to represent the pumpkin number the user is choosing. So we'll go ahead and give this a parameter called pumpkin number. Okay, now when we get this value, this is telling the function that, hey, whatever the user clicks on and we get an attribute, when we get an argument from the function saying, hey, you're supposed to expect a pumpkin number of 1, this function will run and think that, hey, sometime in this code, I'm going to use the variable pumpkin number, and whatever that is, I'm going to set it to the value that the user told me to set it as, whether that's 1, 2, 3, or 4, depending on which pumpkin the user selects. So let's go ahead and add our curly brace to start writing the code that's going to be the function hide me. Now, what do we want the function hide me to do? Well, first of all, we want to change this message over here to say good luck. So if we go back and we load our fully working game over here, as you can see, when we click on one of these, it's going to automatically say good luck, and then we had that GIF or GIF that came out with the pumpkin and the turkey hiding inside there. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll minimize this one and go back to Komodo. So the first thing we want to do is let's go ahead and set the message to good luck. So how do we do that? Well, we do it the same way we did over here, where will you hide, but we're going to change the message into good luck. So we're going to access the identifier called message, and then we're going to access the inner HTML by putting dot inner HTML, and we will set that in quotation marks to good luck. So in all uppercases, good luck with dot dot dot. And there we go. Now we change the message to inner HTML whenever someone clicks on that pumpkin. Now, we're going to have to do different things depending on which pumpkin the user chooses. So we're going to run a series of if statements. So for example, if the user chooses pumpkin number 1, we're going to set the GIF to go off into that certain picture. And if the user picks pumpkin number 4, we're going to set the GIF to go off in picture number 4. So let's go ahead and make a couple of if statements. So if, now in the test code or the Boolean expression, we want to test the pumpkin number value that we're going to get. Now if the pumpkin number comes out 1, we want to change this picture for the image into the other GIF where we have the turkey hiding. So if pumpkin number equals, so double equals, you can even do triple equals, but we're going to do double equals, just so there's no problems with converting from strings to numbers. So if pumpkin number equals 1, well, what do we want it to do? And what's the code? So we want to select the hiding place. Now the hiding place will allow us to know exactly where the user has hidden. So we're going to set hiding place as equal to 1. That way the code knows that we're going to be hiding in the number 1 pumpkin. So we're going to set this to 1. We don't have to put quotation marks, just the number 1, because it's going to be a numerical value. Now, what else do we want to do? Well, we want to change the picture that the person clicked on, and we would change the source of the image. That way we can get the GIF of the pumpkin or the turkey hiding in that pumpkin. So if the user selects pumpkin number 1, we're going to change pick1, which is the identifier we gave to the first picture. pick1.src will equal, and now we're going to get that file name for the turkey hiding. So let's go ahead and find that one. I believe it's hide.gif. We can go ahead and open this, and over here, as you can see, it's the one with the turkey hiding, and yep, that seems good. So let's go ahead and change this pick1.src to hide.gif. Alright, now what else do we want to do? Well, if you guys know what GIFs are, they're basically like short little frames of pictures that go on and they repeat each other. Now the problem with this is that because they repeat, we don't want the turkey to continually hide and hide and hide until something else happens. So we need to time it. Now we're going to have to learn about a built-in function into JavaScript called set timeout should I say. Now what set timeout will do, so let's go ahead and write that out. So set timeout. Now this will allow us to set another function that we want to run and set a delay. So we're going to have this picture run for a couple of seconds, and we're going to have it automatically go to another function. That way it doesn't continually run this GIF around. So we're going to use another function that we want to do, which is going to be explode, which is where the computer is going to decide which pumpkin it wants to explode randomly. So we're going to have a function called explode, and that's where we want the delay to go after it finishes. Now we want to add a comma, and now we want to tell the timeout how long should I delay before I go and run the function explode. Now this is going to be in milliseconds. Now I timed it out, and I believe that the hide.gif will only repeat after 1800 milliseconds. So we're going to have this go to the function explode right after it gets 1800 milliseconds past it shows the picture. And that is how we will set the timeout, and then we are done with this entire if statement. Now we will have to recreate this if statement for 3 more times in order to do it for the 3 different pumpkins that we are allowed to choose from. So what I found it easier to just copy this. So we're going to copy this entire if statement. So Control C or Command C for different people. So let's go ahead and retry that. So Command C, and let's go ahead and paste that again, and then again, and then again. So for 4 different pumpkins. Now we're going to have to go around and change a little bit. So this one's going to be for pumpkin number 2. So if pumpkin equals number 2, we want to set hiding place as equal to pumpkin number 2. Now we want to change the picture 2.src to the hide.gif, and we also want to keep this the same. So we're going to have it delay for 1800 milliseconds, and then it's going to run the function explode, which we haven't created yet. So next up is pumpkin number 3. So we're going to change this to if pumpkin number 3 is selected, then we want to make the variable hiding place equal to 3. Then we want to change the picture 3.src to hide.gif, and then set timeout to explode. Lastly, we have the last pumpkin. If pumpkin equals 4 and the user selects 4, that means we want to make the hiding place equal to 4, and we want picture number 4.src to be changed to that gif. Now let's go ahead and see what happens. I'm not sure if it'll run or not because we don't have an explode function, but we should be able to see what happens. So let's go ahead and save that and see what happens. Now this pumpkin should be able to animate now. So let's click on one of these. And there we go. We had the pumpkin. See, since we didn't have a function that went to explode, it's just going to keep recurrently hiding and popping back out, which we don't want. So we're going to have to go and create another function called explode, which will automatically reset this GIF. But as you can see, our text worked. We got this update to good luck, and we got the turkey to pop out.